Our clinic spent over 4 years litigating a crazy set of federal cases known as fake stash house cases. In these cases, the ATF, a federal law enforcement agency, doesn't wait for someone to do something wrong. Instead, they create a crime and they choose someone to commit it. They use a confidential informant and an undercover agent to approach a person and convince him to rob a drug stash house that contains large quantities of drugs, worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. They encourage the target to bring guns and friends because they claim that the stash house will be heavily guarded. When the target shows up with the guns that the ATF has encouraged them to bring, the whole group is arrested and charged with drug and gun offenses that carry 15 to 25-year mandatory minimum prison terms. Of course, there's no real stash house, no drugs, no guards. Everything is a complete fabrication. The government claimed that they were targeting the worst of the worst with this operation, but it didn't turn out that way. In Chicago, they went after people with little to no criminal history, and they went after people like our client, Leslie Mayfield, who was working and trying to meaningfully contribute to his community when he was targeted. One of the most problematic aspects of this scheme is that the ATF almost exclusively targeted people of color. The numbers are incredibly disturbing. Fully 92% of the people the ATF chose to commit this fake crime were people of color. Our clinic saw a wider problem and wanted to attack the fake stash house operation systematically by arguing that the ATF had engaged in racially discriminatory law enforcement. Alison Siegler, the clinic's founder and director, spearheaded this entire project and worked absolutely tirelessly for years to pursue justice for our clients. It is no understatement to say that this project simply would not have happened without Alison's vision and tenacity. She and Judith Miller, another professor in the clinic, conceptualized the groundbreaking legal strategy we pursued. Something like this had never been done before in a criminal case in federal court in Chicago or anywhere else. We ultimately filed motions to dismiss on behalf of 43 clients targeted in these fake stash house cases.
This case is very personal to me, not just because of all the work we put into it, but also because I joined the clinic faculty in 2014, right at the very beginning of the stash house litigation. Before I even arrived in Chicago, Alison called me to say that some local criminal defense attorneys had asked for our help with a complicated constitutional issue on appeal. She suggested I start my job a little early so that I could get in on the ground floor. Once she described the issue, I couldn't wait to get involved. She told me that the attorneys in a stash house case had persuaded a federal judge to order discovery about whether the ATF was discriminating on the basis of race, and the prosecution had appealed. Everyone knows there's a huge problem with race in the criminal legal system, but Supreme Court case law makes it really hard to litigate racial bias issues or even get discovery about them. Clinic students briefed the appeal with us, and we collaborated with the federal defender. We ultimately convinced the Seventh Circuit, sitting en banc, to distinguish the impossible Supreme Court standard. After that, other attorneys used our precedent to make the law better elsewhere. So the prosecutor's appeal turned into a victory for our clients and many others, and paved the way for us to file motions to dismiss for racial bias. Over the course of the litigation, scores of clinic students worked on the cases. They devoted thousands of hours to writing motions and briefs, meeting with clients, litigating for release on bond, and arguing in court at sentencing hearings.
The clinic ultimately persuaded the 9 federal judges handling the stash house cases to do something that had never been done before: hold a joint evidentiary hearing with dueling experts. That hearing was held in December 2017, and the scene was incredible, with the 9 judges arrayed on the bench like the Supreme Court or an en banc oral argument, clients filling a jury box, and rows upon rows of spectators and journalists. From the moment the clinic began questioning the experts, all 9 judges started jumping in, cross-examining the witnesses and the lawyers alike. As clinic students, we had feverishly prepared and mooted the examinations with our instructors and our expert, and watching everything we had worked on get put into effect was electrifying. We got to hear the professors ask lines of questions that we had developed, watch as our expert testified that the ATF's targeting practices had a significant discriminatory effect, and co-author the closing argument in the heat of the moment. And 6 months later, I got to do the single thing in my whole life of which I'm most proud: stand up in federal court and argue at sentencing on behalf of one of our clients, Leslie Mayfield. At that hearing, the judge set Leslie free immediately.
Generally speaking, I believe that the litigation that the Justice Clinic was a part of brought hope to a group of men that was in a hopeless situation, which also included myself. After we were targeted by ATF, I believe that ATF was deciding who no longer was fit to be in society and used the fake stash house cases to take them off the streets. At that time, I learned what the justice system thought of me, and that was that I was a criminal. And I ended up coming to terms with the fact that I was a criminal and I committed criminal activity. And after that, I discovered that I had the power to change that. Then the question for me was it too late? The sentence that they gave me, to me, was a death sentence at my age. But the litigations that I was able to fall under gave me that opportunity to be able to show that I can change, to prove that I can change, and now that I'm out, I'm a contributing member of society. I'm an essential worker. I contribute greatly to the efficiency of my department at the company in which I work. I contribute greatly to my family, to my friends, my loved ones, and all of that may not have been possible had it not been for the litigations of the Justice Clinic. And I met some wonderful students who were passionate about what they were doing, and I felt it. They learned from 3 incredible professors who I admire greatly, and I thank them.
Over the long course of this litigation, we had some real victories. Our students illuminated the injustice of these cases for the judges. One judge wrote an opinion expressing disgust with the ATF's tactics, while another judge said, quote, "It is time for these false stash house cases to end and be relegated to the dark corridors of our past." That kind of recognition from judges is rare. Our students also gave our clients back their liberty. As you heard from Leslie, after the big hearing, the government dismissed the draconian mandatory minimum charges, and most of our clients got time-served sentences and returned home to their families. Collectively, our clients were literally spared hundreds of years in prison. And our students changed the prosecutors' minds. As a result of our litigation, the government stopped bringing ATF stash house cases, not just in Chicago, but in most of the country. That is true systemic reform. It was an extraordinary honor to work alongside Professor Erica Zunkel, Professor Judith Miller, and the many, many students whose brilliance, energy, and dedication powered this fight. There were some devastating losses along the way, but ultimately, we won the war. And in the process, we all came away with a new understanding of the power of collaborating, the power of innovating, and the power of fighting for another human being.